Inflation. That's the next discussion right now. And what have I done with my pens? All right. Okay, so if you've been keeping up with the videos up to now, you have learned that the whole printing money causes inflation thing is based on a misunderstanding of how the financial system actually operates, how the central bank actually operates, and so on. And so all you've heard so far, though, is this is how inflation doesn't work. What you haven't heard is how inflation does work, all right? And I guess there's 4 basic causes, and I'm not going to have to put you down, dog. Not like put you down for good. Let's see. Four basic causes. This is all from the Davidson book. Diminishing, returns. What else does he list here? Profits. Where's the wages one? Profits, wages, and imports. Profits, wages, and imports. All right. First of all, something really important to understand from the post-Keynesian perspective is that inflation is always and everywhere a redistribution of income. The way it's often described in the popular press, and unfortunately sometimes in class, is that inflation is something that affects all of us equally, that we're all like, oh no, inflation is taking place, it's eating away all of our purchasing power. But as a macroeconomist who doesn't suffer from the fallacy of composition, you know that, wait a minute, if one person's getting paid more, I'm sorry, I just screwed the whole thing up. If one person's paying more, somebody else must be getting paid more. So there's no way that inflation is a net loss for the entire economy. I'm trying to see if the screen looks okay. All right. Actually, I'm going to move the camera a little bit further this way. There. There's no way that inflation is a net loss for the entire economy, because if I'm paying more, somebody's getting more. So always, always, always start your thinking about inflation along the lines of who's getting better off? Who's being rewarded? Who's the one that's earning the higher income? And maybe I'm okay with that. It depends on the particular group that is earning more income. It might be perfectly fine. For example, let's say we're in the middle of COVID right now, although they're apparently today the first people in England got vaccinations. But let's say we discovered that potatoes would cure and prevent COVID-19, all right? So then there's this massive surge in the demand for potatoes. The price of potatoes goes up, and that causes inflation, all right? That's what inflation is. It's an increase in the average price level. And of course, if the price of potatoes goes up, then anyone who just wanted to eat potatoes for fun, rather than as a vaccination, anything that they want to buy has gone up in price. Vodka goes up in price. French fries go up in price, and so on, right? So it causes inflation. Now, would we want to, as the Federal Reserve operates right now, throw the economy into recession to stop that inflation? Or would we say to ourselves, well, this is perfect. Since potatoes have become much more expensive, farmers will plant more potatoes, and that's what we wanted. It is a market signal, all right? So if inflation is redistributing income to potato farmers because all of the rest of us want more potatoes, let it happen. That's what's supposed to happen. The prices in the potato industry go up. We produce more potatoes, and so this is a logical response to the increased demand. So no, it depends on what's causing the inflation. In that case, we wouldn't want to do anything about it. We'll say, well, no, let it go. I mean, let the price of potatoes go. You know, we may, for humanitarian reasons, want to step in, since we're talking about a way of preventing disease here. But otherwise, there's no reason to stop it, because what's happening is what we want to happen, and that is potato farmers get wealthier, and therefore they plant more potatoes. Now, on the other hand, the largest episode of inflation in the history of the U.S. economy was, well, at least post-war, was the OPEC oil embargo. So oil prices go way up because the oil producing, I think I talked about this a little bit in the other video, oil-producing countries were reducing the supply of oil, and so clearly oil producers were getting wealthier. Well, was that what we wanted? Was this because there was an increase in demand, or was it because they could increase their profits. Davidson also calls this monopoly inflation. And that's what it was, all right? There was this, and we don't, that's not necessarily, I mean, it's all a value judgment here. But generally speaking, if our values are being formed by capitalism, we would say that's not good. You shouldn't be able to raise your price despite the fact there has been no change in market conditions, and only because you are able to do so because there simply aren't many oil exporters. Potato farmers, go ahead, that's fair. Oil exporters, no, that's not good. So you always have to ask yourself, who's getting wealthier before you decide, A, whether it's good or bad, and B, how to address it. All right, so let's go through these four here that Davidson covers in the chapter. The first one is the one caused by the fact that the economy is growing so fast that we can't keep up with supply. That eventually you end up with bottlenecks. All right, you'll see this if you pay attention to it. When there's an economic expansion, the Federal Reserve will say, oh, well, it turns out that building materials are going up in price right now. Now, the Fed, as you've read in some of the other readings here, including this Davidson chapter, the Fed says, the Fed tries to attack all kinds of inflation as if all of them are this and as if that's bad. From the post-Keynesian perspective, like, well, if there's a crunch in the housing sector and because there's so much demand, then the price of building materials should go up. It should go up because in that way people substitute to other kinds of building materials, and those who are making, bricks or whatever will make more of them. That's what we want to have happen. So we should let that go. We can do things in the long run. We can try to do things to help industry respond more quickly, but otherwise there's no reason to do anything about diminishing returns inflation, but about inflation that's being caused by the fact that the economy is growing so fast that suppliers can't keep up, and so their prices are going up. Okay, I mean, that's what's supposed to happen in a capitalist economy. Your goods and services are in high demand, and therefore you get higher profits. Good for you. This one here, income, so let me be more clear up here. Income is being redistributed towards those whose goods and services are in highest demand. Good for them. This is a situation where, and how does Davidson word that? Pardon me, dog. Let's see. When entrepreneurs believe that the market conditions have changed sufficiently so that it is possible for them to increase the markup of prices relative to costs, the economy will experience profits inflation. So whenever firms that are in less competitive industries think they can get away with it, they'll jack up the price. Now, there's a number of things. There's a whole post-Keynesian microeconomic literature that talks about this, about what the limitations are in terms of market competition, in terms of the potential for government antitrust intervention and so forth. But if you can get away with it, you jack up the prices. And that we generally consider as not good. Now, do we address that like the Fed currently does by throwing the entire macroeconomy into recession? Why would we do that? Why would we try to throw the economy? What? Why would we? Oh, there's Santa Claus is right over there. He's not a Christian. Why would we throw the entire macroeconomy into recession over that? We would directly address the problem at the level of the firm, as we have done in many cases, although in many cases we also haven't. Another possibility is, and again, let's see how Davidson words it, every increase in money wages not offset by productivity improvements raises production costs. All right, so what happens is that when workers are able to get higher wages despite the fact there really hasn't been more productivity, this drives up prices as well. Do we throw the entire macroeconomy into recession over that? No. Now, there's actually a good record of this. Productivity has gone up quite a bit over the last several decades, but wages have lagged far behind, which is why we have had very little inflation. But as long as wages are just keeping up with productivity, good for them. All right. If you're getting paid more because you are more productive, good for you. Otherwise, then the government can intervene in however way they want to stop at that level, not throw the entire economy into recession, but at that level. The last one is what happened with OPEC. With OPEC, this was oil we were importing, and basically what he says there is the more important this import is to your country and the less you have other substitutes, then the more import inflation can affect you. So if oil prices go up in Saudi Arabia and we have to import that oil, then absolutely that's going to be translated into inflation for all of us. Who's getting the income? the exporters, we're the importer, the exporters. And, we have to sort of go through and ask ourselves again, is this because they were able to avoid competition, which was the case with OPEC, or is there just a massive demand for oil right now? And so the price of oil is going up. Well, okay, in that case, then that should be fine, because that way people look for other substitutes for oil and whatnot. I've never said that before, but I've heard it a lot from other people. It's been in my passive vocabulary, but not my active one. And I think that is it for inflation. Dag nabbit, I put my notes down. Let me look through the chapter here. Oh, no, there is one more thing I wanted to tell you about. Yeah. Okay. All right, now, do I want to tell you about that or not? Yeah, I do. All right. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about here, and that is that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, at least to the mid-80s, there was a pretty tight correlation between changes in, I'm going to try to write this left-handed, and I'm right-handed normally, money supply and prices. Now, as you saw in that previous video, the MV equals PY thing, that's the argument that, oh, money growth causes inflation. And the way they backed that up was they said, look, they're moving at the same rate. There's a very high statistical correlation between this and this. Well, Paul Davidson, the author of the textbook that I normally use in this class, except for coronavirus times, he said that he actually wrote a paper on that back in '73, and he said, look, given the way the financial system actually operates, there is a logical reason for those to be correlated, but this didn't cause that. That caused this. Let me say that again. Money supply growth doesn't cause the inflation. The inflation caused money supply growth. And you have to flip around to that endogenous money view where banks are able to create their own money to understand this. Puppy, I'm going to have to put you down. And think of it this way. Let's say it's 1973. That says POIL there, but by that I mean price of oil. And let's say that we've had the OPEC oil embargo. Price of oil just went up, all right? Now, let's say that you are an entrepreneur and you have been borrowing money from the bank every month for working capital. What you do is you borrow every month to pay for all your inputs and your labor. At the end of the month, you sell your output, and then you repay the loan and take out a new one for the next month. A very common scenario. So, you've been borrowing money every month. Well, what are you going to do it was October of '73 that the prices first started going up. What are you going to do by November or December? Are you going to want to borrow more money or less money to pay for your inputs? Well, your inputs got a lot more expensive. So presumably, demand for loans. Your demand for loans is going to go up, all right? Now, that's going to put, the banks are going to realize that this is a legitimate request, that you're not taking this money to go off to Shreveport and gamble, that it's actually being used to try to produce goods and services which have become more expensive now. And since banks create their own money, the money supply goes up. Looking back at the things we talked about with how the financial system operates, if this caused banks to run short of reserves, then what's the Federal Reserve going to do? Well, the Fed targets interest rates. And especially since the Fed realizes these are legitimate demands for cash, what the Fed's going to do is they're going to increase the amount of reserves as well. So they're going to supply the reserves so that it is possible for banks to create these loans. And then eventually, when these entrepreneurs sell their output, are they going to sell it at the same old price, or are they going to charge more? They got to charge more. That the final price of goods and services is going to go up because the oil prices went up, and the money supply is going to go up because the oil prices went up. And so, yes, Davidson said in this 1973 article that, and that wasn't about the oil crisis hadn't happened yet when he wrote this paper, but it was about this basic scenario, that yes, indeed, those two can be highly correlated in the real world, but the reason is not because that causes that. The reason is because they have a mutual cause.